Cinques Consolation by Helen Garner is a true crime non-fiction book published in 2004. In this book, Garner follows the trial of Anu Singh and Madhavi Rao, who are charged with the murder of Joe Cinque, Singh's boyfriend. This is the second book of Garner's that I've read, and I'm so glad that I decided to pick it up. The book is less about the facts of the crime itself and more of a slow meander through the human condition, with some reflections about the Australian court system on the side. Don't get me wrong, the book definitely explores the crime itself, it's just not a whodunit kind of crime book. Mainly because the accused aren't arguing that they're innocent, they're arguing for a partial defense on the basis of mental impairment. What I particularly loved about having read this book is the way it forced me to analyse my own opinions on Australia's legal system. I took legal studies as a subject for my senior years in high school, and during that time and afterwards as an adult, I formed some pretty firm opinions regarding certain aspects of the law. And whilst I am definitely not an expert on these matters, it is something that I feel pretty confident about in a debate. Now, Garner didn't make me change my mind, but she did make me question them, re-examine them, which is so important to do throughout your life, and I really appreciate that this book helped me to do that. I also love how Garner desensationalizes the proceedings. This isn't an American serial killer documentary in book form. It's slow and very realistic, at times uncomfortably so. This isn't a hype book for a crime, but a dedication to the victim. It was one of those instances where I didn't realize how invested in the story I was until I turned the final page of the book. And when I did, I was left in a state of almost shock. I had to take a moment to fully grasp everything that had happened. If you're a person who likes true crime, even the sensationalized style, I would still recommend giving this book a go. But if you're a person who doesn't like true crime usually because of the sensationalism, then this book is right up your alley, and I would highly recommend it. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Revolutionary Russia, 1891 to 1991 by Orlando Figes is a non-fiction book about Russia between 1891 and 1991 with a focus on the lead up to and the fallout of the October Revolution of 1917. The book was published in 2014 and is only 422 pages long, split into 20 chapters and an introduction. The author is a professor at Birkbeck University of London, where he teaches history, and he has authored 10 books about various aspects of Russian history with a strong focus on the 20th century. Normally, when I read non-fiction books, I will read a novel or a book of poetry alongside it to help break up the text a bit while still making progress towards my reading goals for the month. But I found this book so remarkably easy to read that I didn't feel the need to do that this time around. Each chapter was only about 20 pages long and very easy to digest. This is meant to be an introductory book to the subject, so the language Figes uses reflects the target audience. He does seem to assume that you know a little bit about the subject though, dropping names or terms without defining them until later in the text, or occasionally not at all. This wasn't an issue for me, but I also took a course in revolutionary Russia during my university degree, so whilst I don't think they'd be an issue to most readers anyway, I can't say for certain. It's a minor issue regardless, only popping up here or there, so don't let that dissuade you from reading it. You can always just do a quick Google if need be. Something to keep in mind if you decide to pick up this book is that it is very much an overview of the events that took place between 1891 and 1991, rather than a look at the historical figures of that time. Whilst Figes does spend some time giving the reader a quick backstory here or there, it's only just enough for you to understand what's happening and why that person made the decisions that they did, but nothing more. Which for me only made me more interested to read more about those individuals. For example, as soon as Nicholas II is no longer on the throne, he and his family disappear from the pages, because they are no longer important to the story of the revolution's history, with Figes only taking a quick sentence or two to inform the reader later on that whilst the civil war was going on, the Romanovs were all murdered by the Red Army before immediately moving on to what happened next, which only fueled my long-held desire to learn more about Russian royalty further. So if you're brand new to the subject or want a short refresher course, I would highly recommend picking this one up. But if you're well versed on the subject and are looking for something a little more specific, like looking into Lenin or Stalin in depth for example, then I would maybe overlook this one. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt is a contemporary fiction novel published in 2013. It won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction, the Audie Award for Literary Fiction, and the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Fiction, all in 2014. It was also nominated for the National Book Critics Circle, the Australian Book Industry Awards, the Women's Prize for Fiction, and the Goodreads Choice Awards for that year. The story follows a young boy who is the victim of a terrorist attack and his life as he deals with the fallout of that day. The first half of the book was amazing. Tartt has a phenomenal talent for writing, and the scenes she created just tore my heart in two. I'm thoroughly impressed by and jealous of her skill. But the book is 771 pages long, which in my opinion was too long for the story being told. So you know where I'm coming from. I'm not a stranger to long books, and whilst I can find them hard to get through sometimes, I can usually tell when it's a problem with my attention span and when it's a problem with the book itself. And unfortunately, I do think that this was the latter this time around. A huge part of the book, don't worry, no spoilers here, made me very anxious, which it's clearly meant to, and I did not enjoy being kept in that state of anxiety for 771 pages. There was a point where, just past the halfway mark, when I sort of realized that the resolution process wasn't even going to start anytime soon regarding this issue, let alone be resolved, where the tension just drained out of me. Things were happening, but I stopped caring about them. I finished this book solely because when I made this argument to people in the future, I didn't want anyone to be able to say that my opinion was invalid because I didn't finish the book. I soldiered through it, and I can't help but think the eventual resolution would have at least been satisfying had the book not taken so long to get there. To be clear, I'm not saying that any book that makes your readers anxious is a bad book. I am not saying that. I'm not even saying that this book was a bad book, but in this instance, I think the story was unnecessarily drawn out, and because of that, I never want to read that book again, and I'm very hesitant to recommend it to anyone without giving a warning first. Which is a shame, because the writing itself is so good, and the basic story was so interesting. It's just so damn long. This is the first book of Donna Tartt's that I've read, and I already own The Secret History, so I will be reading it at some point. But I think I'll have to wait until I've gotten over the Goldfinch before I pick it up. So if nothing I've said sounds like a deterrent to you, then you should definitely give this book a go. But if you're already a very anxious person and you don't feel like exacerbating that, then I would skip over this book entirely. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Thank you so much for watching this flick through. Have you read any of these books? If you have, feel free to sound off your opinions down below, but if possible, try to keep this a spoiler-free zone, or at least hide them under a read more if possible. If you liked what you saw, please think about giving this video a thumbs up, and if you want to see more, remember to subscribe, and then ring that bell if you want to be notified every time I put a video up. I hope you have a wonderful day.